Lastly, we'll get started in about 2 minutes, okay? Inshallah.
Okay.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Inshallah, 10th night of Muharram, Shahadat of Hazrat Ali Asghar alayhi salam. May Allah accept our azadari, our du'as on this night, inshallah. We'll get started with the Ziyarat Ashura, followed by Marsiya, Majlis, Matam, and conclude with Ziyarat, inshallah. So Abbas Ali, if you're ready, Bismillah.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله السلام عليك يا خيرة الله وابن خيرته السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين وابن سيد الوسيين السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثار والوتر الموتور السلام عليك وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بكيت وبكي الليل والنهار يا أبا عبد الله لقد عزمت الرزيات وجلت وعزمت المصيبة بك علينا وعلى جميع أهل الإسلام وجلت وعظمت مصيبتك في السماوات على جميع أهل السماوات ولعن الله أمة أسس أساس الظلم والجور عليكم أهل البيت ولعن الله أمة دفعتكم عن مقامكم وأذعلتكم عن مراتبكم التي رتبكم الله فيها ولعن الله أمة قتلتكم ولعن الله الممهدين لهم بالتمكين من قتالكم بريت إلى الله وإليكم منهم ومن أشيائهم وأتباعهم وأوليائهم يا أبا عبد الله إني سلم لمن سالمكم وحرب لمن حاربكم إلى يوم القيامة ولعن الله آل زياد وآل مروان ولعن الله بني أمية قاتبات ولعن الله ابن مرجان ولعن الله عمر بن سعد ولعن الله شمران ولعن الله أمة أسرجت وعلجمت وتنكبت لقتالك بأبي أنت وأمي لقد عزم مصابي بك فأسأل الله الذي أكرم مقامك وأكرمني بك أن يرزقني طلب ثاري مع إمام منصور من أهل بيت محمد صلى الله عليه وآله اللهم اجعلني عندك وجيها بالحسين عليه السلام في الدنيا والآخرة. يا أبا عبد الله إني أتقرب إلى الله وإلى رسوله وإلى أمير المؤمنين وإلى فاطمة وإلى الحسن وإليك بموالاتك وبالبراءة ممن قاتلك ونسب لك الحرب وبالبراءة ممن أسس أساس الظلم والجور عليكم وابرأوا إلى الله وإلى رسوله ممن أسس أساس ذلك وبنى عليه بنيانا وجرى في ظلمه وجوره عليكم ولا أشيائكم بريت إلى الله وإليكم منهم وتقربوا إلى الله ثم إليكم بموالاتكم وموالاة وليكم وبالبراءة من أعدائكم والناصبين لكم الحرب وبالبراءة من أشيائهم وأتباعهم. إني سلم لمن سالمكم وحرب لمن حاربكم وولي لمن وعلىكم وعدو لمن أعداكم فأسأل الله الذي أكرمني بمعرفتكم ومعرفة أوليائكم ورزقني البراءة من أعدائكم أن يجعلني معكم في الدنيا والآخرة وأن يثبت لي عندكم قدم صدق في الدنيا والآخرة وأسأله أن يبلغني المقام المحمود لكم عند الله وأن يرزقني طلب ثاري مع إمام هدى ظاهر ناطق بالحق منكم وأسأل الله بحقكم وبالشأن الذي لكم عند أن يؤتيني بمصابي بكم أفضل ما يؤتي مصابا بمصيبة مصيبة ما أعظمها وأعظم رزيتها في الإسلام وفي جميع السماوات والأرض. اللهم اجعلني في مقامي هذا ممن تناله منك صلوات ورحمة ومغفرة. اللهم اجعل محياي محيا محمد وآل محمد ومماتي ممات محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إن هذا يوم تبركت به بنو أمية وابن آكلة الأكباد اللعين ابن اللعين على لسانك ولسان نبيك صلى الله عليه وآله في كل موطن وموقف وقف فيه نبيك صلى الله عليه وآله. اللهم لعن أبا سفيان ومعاوية ويزيد بن معاوية عليهم منك اللعنات عبد العابدين. وهذا يوم فرحت به آل زياد وآل مروان بقتلهم الحسين صلوات الله عليه. اللهم فضائف عليهم اللعنة منك والعذاب العليم. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك في هذا اليوم وفي موقفي هذا وأيام حياتي بالبراءة منهم واللعنة عليهم وبالموالاة لنبيك وآل نبيك عليه وعليهم السلام. اللهم لعن أول ظالم ظلم حق محمد وآل محمد وآخر تابع له على ذلك. اللهم لعن الإصابة التي جاهدت الحسين وشايعت وبايعت وتابعت على قتله. اللهم لعنهم جميعا. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي هلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بكيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعل الله آخر عهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على حسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. اللهم خذ أنت أول ظالم باللعن مني وابدأ به أولا ثم عن الثانية والثالثة والرابعة. اللهم لعن يزيد خامسا ولعن عبيد الله بن زياد وابن مرجان وعمر بن سعد وشمران وعلى أبي سفيان وعلى زياد وعلى مروان إلى يوم القيامة. سجدة. اللهم لك الحمد حمد الشاكرين لك على مصابهم. الحمد لله على عظيم رزيته. اللهم ارزقني شفاعة الحسين يوم الورود وثبت لي قدم صدق عندك مع الحسين وأصحاب الحسين الذين بذلوا محجهم دون الحسين عليه السلام.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Thank you, Abbas Ali. Jamil, if you're ready. Muhammad وآل محمد صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. नेज़े से असगर को नजर आई जो मादर, देखा बुला कर है परेशान है मुज़तर, रोने लगे कहने लगे तब अली असगर, माँ मुझे अपने सीने से लगा ले, माँ मुझे अपनी गोदी में छुपा ले, माँ मुझे अपने सीने से लगा ले, माँ मुझे अपनी गोदी में छुपा ले, माँ मैं नेज़े पे हूँ, माँ मैं नेज़े पे हूँ, माँ मुझे अपनी सीने से लगा ले, माँ मुझे अपनी गोदी में छुपा ले, माँ मैं नेज़े पे हूँ। अम्मा बहुत दिन हुए झूले में न सोया, माँ तेरी इज्जत की कसम फिर भी न रोया, अब तुझे देखा तो मेरे लब हुए गोया, आज बंधे हाथों को झूला सा बना ले, सीने से लगा ले, माँ मैं नेज़े पे हूँ, माँ मैं नेज़े पे हूँ। जिस्म कहाँ सर है कहाँ हाय मुकद्दर, अम्मा बदन रह गया करबल की ज़मीं पर, अम्मा तेरे साथ चला आया मेरा सर, करते तुझे कैसे लाइनों के हवाले, सीने से लगा ले, माँ मैं नेज़े पे हूँ, माँ मैं नेज़े पे हूँ। गर्म हवा गर्म ज़मीं जलता हुआ तीर, अम्मा जरा सोचो मेरे कद से बराती, कैसे कहूँ हल्क पे जिस वक्त लगाती, हो गए बेहोश मुझे देखने वाले सीने से लगा ले, माँ मैं नेज़े पे हूँ, माँ मैं नेज़े पे हूँ। देख तेरा लख्ते जिगर यूं तो है असगर, नेज़ा सवारी है अकबर के बराबर। नो के सिना पर है सितारा सा मेरा सर, मेरी शुजात पे गले मुझको लगा ले, सीने से लगा ले, माँ मैं नेज़े पे हूँ, माँ मैं नेज़े पे हूँ। बाबा का सर भाई का सर नो के सिना पर, आपके सर पे नहीं अम्मा कोई चादर। कैसे मैं बर्दाश्त करूं अम्मा ये मंजर, जलती हुई खाक से मुंह अपना छुपा ले, सीने से लगा ले, माँ मैं नेज़े पे हूँ, माँ मैं नेज़े पे हूँ, माँ मुझे अपनी सीने से लगा ले, माँ मुझे अपनी गोदी में छुपा ले, माँ मैं नेज़े पे हूँ, माँ मैं नेज़े पे हूँ। मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Uncle Iqbal, Bismillah.
صلوا على النبي.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
जिसे निराशा है ये, भूखा पियासा है ये, दूध पिला ना इसे, ऐ ज़मीने करबला, नाज़ों का पाला है ये, रातों का जागा है ये, गोरी सुलाना इसे, ऐ ज़मीने करबला, खास मुसलमान है ये, असगरे नादा है ये, पानी पिलाना इसे, ऐ ज़मीने करबला, कामिले ईमान है ये, फाते बाकी जान है ये, भूल न जाना इसे, ऐ ज़मीने करबला, खून उनमें है तरबतर ये मेरा रश के कमर दुल्हा बनाना इसे ए ज़मीने करबला खिंच गया सूखा गला रहम न उस पे किया तू न बोला न इसे ऐ ज़मीने करबला झूला झूला न इसे ऐ ज़मीने करबला
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Safter, bismillah.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات.
اللهم
صل على محمد وآل محمد.
पूछा ज़ैनब ने के भाई मेरे क्या तेरी शह ने फरमाया बहन तुम से जुदाई तेरी रोज़े आशूरा मुहर्रम को लड़ाई तेरी चाह सब कुछ पे नादा से सफाई तेरी आज प्यारों की मुलाकात गनीमत जानो ए बहन रोने की ये रात गनीमत जानो देखती क्या है कि एक साहिबे इस्मत बीबी रन के मैदान में सर पीटती रोती है खरी जालती खाक परी फिरती है उस जंगल की आस्ती से कभी दामान से और आशकों से भी अपनी बालों से बुहार जमी कर के ये बे कल इसी खाक पे सोएगा मेरा हाये हुसैन जब सुनी ज़ैनबे बेकास ने ये आहो जारी रो उठी ख्वाब में बेचैन हुई एक बारी फिर लगी पूछने रो रो के दुखी यारी मुझसे कुछ तू भी नजर आती है गम की मारी क्या तेरा नाम है ओ किस लिए चिल्लाती है तेरे रोने से मेरी छाती फटी जाती है बोली क्या पूछती है नाम तू गुम नामों का दाग फर्जन से जलता है कलेजा मेरा बागे जन्नत से है ये दाग मुझे ले आया माहू शबीर की मैं नाम मेरा है ज़ाहरा क्या नहीं जानती ज़ैनब तेरी मादर हूँ मैं ज़ौजे शेरे खुदा बिन ते पैगंबर हूँ मैं मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. John, bismillah.
فاتحة بسم الله ला शय असगर को रख के खब्र में शह ने कहा ऐ ज़मीने करबला लाशे असगर को रख के खबर में शहर ने कहा ऐ ज़मीने करबला ये अमानत है मेरी रखियो हिफाजत से जरा ऐ ज़मीने करबला है ये बेकस का पिसर खून में सब तर बतर बहर खालिक रहम कर बेकसी पर कर नजर अपने पहलू में इसे राम से ली जो सुला होएगा ऐसा तेरा लाश से इन कार मत कर खून से तिन कार था ऐ ज़मीने करबला ये मेरा नूरे नजर छोड़ कर आया है घर दी अमा इसको अगर होंगे खुश खैरुल बशर पर मैं वाकिफ हूँ न देंगे चैन याबी अशकिया एक सितम होगा नया ढूंढ कर ये खबर में काटेंगे बच्चे का गला ऐ ज़मीने करबला अब ये हाले दिलरुबा देख सकता तू सुराग मैं लहद में भी सदा याद करके रोऊंगा तीर लगते ही वो लेना किया मुंह खोल के और लिपटना बाप से खून का गर्दन से बहना और तड़पना लाश का ऐ ज़मीने करबला लाश असग़र को रख के खब्र में शह ने कहा ऐ ज़मीने करबला सल्लल्लाहु मोहम्मद व आले मोहम्मद
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد محمد وآل محمد صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
سورة المباركة الفاتحة أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله لقد جاءت رسول ربنا بالحق الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء المرسلين خاتم النبيين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وبآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين وصل على صاحب الدعوة النبوية والصولة الحيدرية والعصمة الفاطمية والحلم الحسنية والشجاعة الحسينية والصبر السجادية وآثار الفاقرية ومؤاسر الصادقية وعلوم الخاضمية وحجج رضوية وجود التقوية والنقاوة النقوية والهيبة الأسكرية والغيبة الإلهية والقائمة بالحق اللهم عجل وليك الفرج رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم ومحكم كتاب المجيد وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإذا قيل لهم اتبعوا ما أنزل الله قالوا بل نتبع ما ألفينا عليه آباءنا أولو كان آباؤهم لا يعقلون شيئا ولا يهتدون آمنا بالله وصدق الله العلي العظيم أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا بالحسين عليه السلام. Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, the father of monotheism, a prophet that is believed by not just us Muslims but also the Christians and the Jews. If we study the life of the noble Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, we see that one of the things that comes at the forefront of his life is his ability to freely question, his ability to critically think, his ability to never take anything at face value. This is something that not only he nurtured within himself, as can be seen in the Holy Quran, but again, as can be seen in the Holy Quran, also encouraged other people to do the same. He would question members of his own family. He would question members of his own village and tribe. He would question the king of his time, and he would also ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so that he is able to elevate his own faith. If we turn to the Holy Quran, the second chapter of the Holy Quran, Surah Baqarah, verse 260, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, وَإِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ, and remember that time when Ibrahim asked, Rabbi arini kayfa tuhyi al-mawta, my Lord, show me how you give life to the dead. قَالَ أَوَلَمْ تُؤْمِنْ, Allah said, have you not believed? قَالَ بَلَى وَلَكِنْ لِيَطْمَئِنَّ قَلْبِي. Ibrahim said, yes, I believe, but I ask only so that my heart may also be satisfied. Here, Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam is teaching us the importance of how it is to make sure that our heart is satisfied, it reaches certainty, and so that we should always ask questions, freely ask and think, so that we're able to reach that level. For example, tafakkur, tadabbur, tafaqquh, and ta'aqqul. These are words that can be loosely translated into English as contemplation, reflection, understanding, and reasoning. Now, these are concepts that have appeared within the Holy Quran, not just once, but time and time again. And these are also some concepts that not only have appeared in the Holy Quran, but are concepts that have surfaced through the ahadith that we have from the Holy Prophet and through the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And we understand that the more richer our thought process is, the better it is for all of us. And therefore, the topic of discussion that I have titled for tonight's discussion is titled The Importance of Critical Thinking Within Our Own Lives. And inshallah, not only will we be using the Holy Quran to aid us in our discussion, but we'll be using illustrious incidents from the lives of the Holy Prophet and of course the Ahlul Bayt, so to see how we can apply this very important concept within our own life, inshallah. And therefore, to continue with this topic, it is of the utmost importance and vital that we also understand what we mean when we say critical thinking. Now, of course, we live in an age that is known as the information age. This means that we live in an age where there is an abundance of data, an abundance of information, and abundance of knowledge. However, what is more important right now, more so than ever before, is that we evaluate every piece of information, data, and knowledge that we get in a very constructive manner. And therefore, critical thinking, if we think about it, is a mode of thinking. And it's about any subject, idea, or problem. And it's a mode of thinking in which a person critically and clearly thinks rationally, thinks meticulously, thinks openly, thinks analytically, and also exercises some challenges when he thinks and engages with the information in a challenging, constructive manner, whatever information is received. And of course, the richer the process, the richer and deeper and the quality of the process, the better it is. And to illustrate this point, let me share with you a tradition that I'm sure many of us have already heard of. The Holy Prophet, according to a tradition, has been quoted to have said that 1 hour of contemplation is better than 1 year of worship. In a very similar tradition, he states that a contemplation of a single hour is superior to 7 years of ibadah. And again, in a very similar tradition, the Holy Prophet says that a contemplation of a single hour is superior, is better than 70 years of ibadah, 70 years of worship. And so we realize that the differences between the reward of the same 1 hour of worship is all dependent on the intention that we have, the depth of our contemplation, and the richness and the quality of the contemplation that we do. And similarly, the same is the case for critical thinking, critically engaging with the information and the data that is so readily available right now. The more we engage with it, the more rich the process of our thoughts is, the better it is for ourselves. And therefore, it's a very similar situation when we start engaging with critical thinking. We're able to derive so much more. However, if we look into critical thinking, the opposite of critical thinking is a mind that is stagnant, a mind that doesn't necessarily question, a mind that takes anything that it gets at face value. And the problem with this mind is that not only is it harmful for the individual itself, but it's also harmful for the society that he lives in. A mind that is stagnant is harmful for the people that are around that individual. And what do I mean? Let me share with you a beautiful story which took place at the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen and Muawiyah. Now, once Muawiyah had openly opposed Imam Ali alayhi salam, he wanted to test the level of obedience of the people of Syria towards himself. And so he asked his confidant, he asked his strategist, Amr bin As. Amr bin As responded to Muawiyah. He said that, so Muawiyah asked him, Amr bin As, what is it that I should do if I want to test the obedience of my people towards me? Amr bin As, being a very cunning, shrewd strategist, politician, and an aide of Muawiyah, who has a response to all situations, responded to Muawiyah at this situation, and he said, order the people of Syria to slaughter a goat in the same way that they slaughter a sheep. Now, a goat is a type of fruit and veg that we, of course, eat. Now, Amr bin As tells Muawiyah that tell the people that they should slaughter a goat, they should slaughter a fruit or veg in the same manner that you'd slaughter an animal, you'd slaughter a sheep. So Muawiyah says, very well, and he gets this order out. And he tells everyone that nowadays, from now on, whenever you eat this piece of fruit or vegetable, slaughter it in the same way that you would slaughter a sheep or an animal. Now, the surprising part here is not only did people accept what Muawiyah had to tell them, they made no objections, they had no hesitations, and straight away did what Muawiyah told them without thinking for themselves, without really questioning, what is it that I'm just doing? And so they started making this a habit amongst their societies, their houses, their community, and in the whole city of Syria. They would slaughter this fruit and vegetable in the same manner that you would slaughter a sheep. And soon this custom, this habit spread. And the people of Iraq found out that this is what the people of Syria are doing. So a few of them were prompted to ask Amir al-Mu'mineen, and they asked him, this is what Muawiyah has asked them to do. Is this something that we should also be doing? Amir al-Mu'mineen first had to clarify the situation. He says, no, this is not what you do. It's not the way that you eat a goat. You don't slaughter it. And at the same time, Imam Ali advises the people. He says, look, be wary. Shaitan shouldn't take away your intellect. And the shaitanic ideas, the satanic ideas, leave you confused and leave you astray. You see, brothers and sisters, for the people to accept whatever Muawiyah told them, for the people to blindly follow Muawiyah with whatever instruction they gave them, tells us about the level of the stagnant mind that those people had. And of course, a stagnant mind such as that one, which doesn't question, which doesn't ask anything, doesn't have anyone except leaders such as Muawiyah. And so you find that the situation of Syria was such that whatever Muawiyah would tell through his media, whatever Muawiyah would tell the people would easily get brainwashed. So much so that, of course, Muawiyah would order them to fight Amir al-Mu'mineen, and they would fight Amir al-Mu'mineen. Muawiyah would say, curse Amir al-Mu'mineen from all of your pulpits, and they would do that. So much so that when the news of the death of Amir al-Mu'mineen came to Syria, that Amir al-Mu'mineen has just passed away in the night of Ramadan in a mosque whilst praying, the people asked, what? Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali used to go to mosque, he used to pray? This was the level of brainwashing that Muawiyah had done, and this was the level of stagnant minds that the people had of that time, and who didn't question Muawiyah. And similarly, if we look into the same scenario at this day and age, and try and look at how our global situation is, we find that not long ago there was a group by the name of ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Sham, or ISIS, as I like to call them, the non-Islamic state of Iraq and Sham, because nothing about them is Islamic. So you find what these groups would plunder, they would wreak havoc in the region, they would plunder, they would loot, they would murder people. Why? Because the leaders told them. And who do you think the followers of groups such as ISIS are? Do you think the followers of the group such as ISIS are those religious individuals who really know what to do, who really know what religion is all about? Are they those individuals that freely think? Are they those individuals that critically engage with the content that they receive from whatever media they have? According to the research which is published by MI6 and CIA, they say that actually those were the types of people, the followers were those that were very novice when it came to the religion of Islam. Rather, most of them weren't even practicing Muslims. In fact, there were those individuals who had high tendencies of taking drugs. There were those individuals that would consume alcohol. There were those individuals that would attend illicit gatherings that you weren't meant to do. The driving force wasn't religion, wasn't Islam. The driving force was a sense of belongingness to a particular type of group. The driving force was to find a purpose in their life. Many of them came from troubled childhoods. And so when they saw this group emerge, suddenly they thought that they have found their purpose. And this is why leaders such as those find blind followers. And it is minds that are stagnant in that way, that if the leaders were to tell their followers murder blindly, they would do it without questioning. If the leaders would tell their followers to wreak havoc, they would do that without asking any questions. If the leaders would ask their followers to plunder and loot senselessly, they would do it because they're not thinking for themselves. And this is why, this is the exact thing that the Holy Prophet came into his society, and this is the exact thing that he wanted to remove from the society. He wanted to liberate the minds of those people in Makkah. He wanted to liberate the minds of those individuals living in Medina, and of course the entire world of the time. My elders know better than I do, for instance, the level of ignorance that was prevalent in the city of Makkah, for example. The pagans of that time, what would they do? They would, for instance, bury their daughter alive. In Makkah, they would dance around the holy Kaaba, circumambulating whilst being naked. They would worship idols that they have made themselves. They would fight amongst themselves within their tribes individually for the pettiest of reasons. Why? Because their leaders would tell them so. Similarly, in Medina, you'd see that they were slightly different to the Meccans. Why? Because they had a religion that they followed. So, for example, some of them would follow Islam. Some of them would follow Christianity. Some of them would follow Judaism. And then you'd also had a few individuals that would follow Zoroastrians, or some of them were Sabians, and there were so many sects of those individuals. But the problem with that society was that those individuals would just listen to their leaders, whatever the leaders say. For example, the Holy Quran states that those leaders, the priests, the rabbis, or the religious leaders of that time would abuse religion. What they would do is they'd write something and they would say, this is the word of God. This is the word of God. This is what is written in the religious scriptures. And the people following them would follow them blindly. But what would happen is that religion would split and split and split and split until it would become until that religion would, of course, become very split. And this is where the Holy Prophet comes, where he had to bring people to the centrality of their faith. Now, I would therefore like to present with you a story, a beautiful incident which helps us understand the importance of critical thinking in our life and how the Holy Prophet tried to push people to extreme situations so they'd also do that. However, the incident that I would like to narrate to you may come across as a little bit confusing. So anytime you feel that there may be some clarity which is needed, please grab me after the majlis, contact me. The committee have my contact details, and I'd love to clarify if there's anything that you feel was a little confusing. And of course, I would write, and whilst I present this incident, I'd like you to remember the context of the people of that time on how they would just follow blindly. So we mentioned that one of the prime problems of Meccan society was that they were pagans. They would, now imagine how intellectually stagnating their minds must be that they, in the morning, they would create a god themselves out of dates, and then they would worship it. They would worship it in the same way that, for example, it's the god that's created them. And then when they feel hungry, slowly, they would eat the god. They would eat the dates. By nighttime, there would be no god. Just imagine what the level of stagnation of that individual, of that society would be, so stagnating that this is the level that they'd got. For example, they would have 360 gods, Lat, Uzza, Manat. They would have a god of war, a god for sea, a god for children, a god for marriage, and a god for everything. And this is the level of stagnation that was there in the mind. So the hadith says that I'd like to narrate to you that Rasulullah once sent an ambassador to a tribe, to a village that had just. So the hadith says that Rasulullah sent an ambassador to those people who would constantly, obviously, were those that would follow their forefathers, that their leaders say something, they would do it. So Rasulullah says that, the Rasulullah sends an ambassador to this people with some instructions. The first instruction that the ambassador says that Rasulullah asks you all to dig a trench. So these individuals, this tribe who've recently converted to Islam, begin digging a trench. And it takes them a couple of hours, but however, after a couple of hours, this trench is done. Ambassador says, the second instruction that Rasulullah gives you is, you need to now fill this trench with brush. So collect leaves, twigs, sticks, fill it up. This is what was done. Third instruction was now lit this blaze up. Again, now there is an inferno, there is a blaze raging within that trench. The ambassador says the fourth instruction that Rasulullah gives you is now you should jump in to this trench. Think about this. If the ambassador says Rasulullah has ordered you all to now jump inside this trench. And as you would imagine, the people, the group split into two. One would say, no, Rasulullah has said it, we must jump into this trench with fire burning. The others would say, no, this can't be what Islam is. This can't be what Rasulullah wants from me. This is a suicide mission. Why would Rasulullah want for me to do something like this? So now these two groups start arguing. And it so happens that that group which said that, no, we shouldn't be jumping into this fire, overpowers the other group. And so they say, no, we will not be jumping into the fire. At that point, the ambassador returns back to Rasulullah and he narrates the whole incident. And he says to Rasulullah, O Prophet of Allah, they have said that they will not obey you. Now, again, I'll repeat this. This incident, I'd like you to understand it at the context of their time, a context where they would say whatever their forefathers would say. They would do whatever their society says them. They would do whatever their tribal leaders tell them. They had no critical thinking. At this point, Rasulullah tells them, jump into the fire, and they said no. And this is the context where I would like you to think, not in our context at this day and age. This is the context that I'd like you to think at that time. So the ambassador goes to Rasulullah, says that they won't obey you. Rasulullah responds, he said, by God, had they jumped into the fire, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have raised them with fire. Had they jumped in, they would be in the fire of hell. Confusing, right? On one hand, the Holy Prophet has ordered them to jump into the fire. At the same time, when they didn't jump into the fire, the Prophet is saying, had they obeyed me, had they jumped into the fire, they would have been in the fire of hell. What does this mean? This is a genius of Rasulullah. You see, when I said this, understand this story in their context, these were the types of people, the greatest challenge that Rasulullah found when he came to that Meccan society, when he came to that Medinan society, was that these individuals would always follow the leaders blindly. Whatever the leaders tell them, they would always do this. So Rasulullah had to break this practice, had to break this mold. Rasulullah had to encourage them, influence them to think critically, think for themselves, not just take things at face value. So for the Prophet to do that, Rasulullah had to push them in an extreme situation, so that they learn that they don't just obey blindly. The Prophet here concludes with a hadith, which is also used up until this day as a jurisprudential principle. He states, Rasulullah states, that there is no obeying the created if you disobey the creator. Rasulullah says there is no obeying the created if you disobey the creator. What does this mean? I think we understand this hadith in a better way from the context of our parents. For example, we are required to obey our parents. May Allah inshallah give them long life. We are required to obey our parents, but what if, God forbid, our parents tell us not to pray salah? What if, God forbid, our parents tell us not to go to Hajj, pay khums, or pay zakat? Now, do we have to obey them? Do we obey them or do we disobey them? At this point, we have to disobey the parents so that we are able to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As the Holy Prophet said, there is no obeying the created if it means disobeying the creator. And through this story, the Holy Prophet was trying to make them think for themselves, think critically for the first time. What happens when the people follow their leaders blindly? They murder, they loot, they plunder senselessly. The whole society goes into chaos. Is this what Islam wants? No, Islam wants me to understand and think for myself. The incident that I narrated was, of course, a very extreme example. and it is only related to that context of that time. But I wanted to show you how far Rasulullah himself went to illustrate this very important point. And this was the genius of Rasulullah. In a similar way, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq says that any hadith which does not agree with the Holy Quran is nothing but incorrect. Or for example, at the point where Rasulullah states in a sermon that he gave at Mina, he states, "O people, ya ayyuhan nas, anything that you hear about me, which agrees with the book of Allah, which agrees with Quran, is something which I have said. But whatever you hear about me, which contradicts the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is something that I have never said." So even here, through the ahadith of the Imam, through the ahadith of the Holy Prophet is saying that even if you come across religious guidance, even if you come across traditions that are enveloped in a religious setting, but they contradict the Holy Quran, think critically, think openly, think freely, and understand that this is a hadith that has been fabricated. I have not said it. We should always understand that we engage with those traditions critically and see if it works with the Holy Quran. The verse of the Holy Quran that I had the honor and the pleasure to recite before yourselves is a verse from the 170th verse of Surah Al-Baqarah. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ, and when it is said to them, اتَّبِعُوا مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ, follow what Allah has revealed, قَالُوا, they say, بَلْ نَتَّبِعُ أَلْفَيْنَ عَلَيْهِ آبَانَا, rather no, we will follow that which we have found what our forefathers are doing. أَوَلَوْ كَانَ آبَاؤُهُمْ يَعْقِلُونَ شَيْئًا وَلَا يَهْتَدُونَ, even though Allah says, even though their fathers understood nothing, nor were they guided. Here, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is stating, that he's stating the same problem that the Holy Prophet would face. When the Holy Prophet would go out and he would preach Islam, the people would say, no, we are happy, we're following what our forefathers were following. And Allah would say that their forefathers were, of course, ignorant and they knew nothing and they want guidance. Here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through this verse is telling us that regardless of the status quo may be, regardless of what your whole society, your whole community may be doing, you need to think for yourself. You can't just be following the crowd blindly just like a sheep. You need to engage with all the information that you get within this information age, of course, critically, and think openly. You know, we don't just have a right to ask, we have a responsibility to ask. We should never accept anything with our eyes closed. We should never accept anything blindly. Why? Because when an individual does that, we become stagnant. When we don't get a response that we're satisfied with, we shouldn't just move forward and live life like nothing's happened. No, we should stick with it, persevere with it, try and find an information until we are able to increase the certainty within our faith. And this is what we should do within our families, within our communities as well. Because what happens when a family or a generation stops thinking? What happens is when a generation stops thinking, their children will also stagnate. And then the children will only be Muslims because their fathers were Muslims. They will only be Muslims because their mothers, their parents, their grandfathers were Muslim. So as long as those children are in a society with their parents, they'll be Muslim. But as soon as the children aren't with their parents, they won't be practicing Muslim. And so this is something that we always need to inculcate within our life, that we always need to question things, even theology, for example. It is said that we need to be understanding the usul of our religion through logic. And then, of course, we bring in the Holy Quran and the traditions to reinforce it, to support it. But for example, questions about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, question about the infallibility of our Ahlul Bayt, for example, questions about the Akhirah, these are all things that we need to ask. And by doing so, we need to increase within our own faith and elevate the status of our certainty. Alhamdulillah, many of us are hailed from those families, for instance, whose forefathers weren't necessarily Muslims, but there was a generation which made the switch. Just imagine the level of open thinking. Imagine the level of critically thinking and challenging the status quo that our forefathers must have had to go to convert into Islam. This is an amazing feat that was done by our forefathers. Alhamdulillah, we should be very grateful for that. However, we should continue in that side. We shouldn't, now that our forefathers have converted, for example, into the religion of Islam, be it 5, 6, 7, 8 generations ago, we shouldn't stagnate. We should always continue thinking. We should always increase the level of faith that we have, because if we don't do that, what happens is we stagnate. We start accepting whatever the media then tells us. And so from that point, we move on that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, of course, given us ears. He's given us the ability to deduce. He's given us the ability of sight, for example. And we need to use that so that we're able to decipher the information for ourselves. Now, I'm not saying that we, for example, don't use the experts. No, for example, if I'm not saying that, for example, you diagnose yourselves. No, we're not experts in, for example, medical field. We, however, need to go to experts. We need to critically engage. We just don't go to any individual. We go to an expert of that field, rather than just taking knowledge from anywhere, rather than, for example, taking a prescription from an engineer. When it comes to your medicinal needs, you take that prescription from a practicing doctor. So far what we've discussed the importance of critically thinking, critically engaging with the information, the data that we receive, especially from the media, especially from this information age that we're currently going, where there's so much information going on. And we've also discussed the importance of critical thinking from the perspective of the Holy Quran, where it says, don't follow your forefathers blindly, think openly. And at the same time, we've discussed the stories of Amir al-Mu'mineen and the goat, and of course the story of the Holy Prophet. Now we come to a juncture, after having understood the importance of critically thinking, we come to a juncture where we must ask ourselves, okay, fine, I get it. Thinking for ourselves is important, but now how can I nurture this skill? How can I nurture this concept within my own mind? And therefore, for the remaining part of the lecture, for the remaining part of the discussion, I'd like to spend time in discussing 3 ways where we can nurture and foster the idea of critical thinking within our own lives. Firstly, when it comes to critical thinking, we need to understand that just like any muscle within our body, just like any action that we perform, critical thinking is also something that comes and strengthens through practice. It's not going to be necessarily the case where it's going to come automatically. Rather, it's something that we need to consciously exert effort. We need to work in developing that side of thinking and engaging critically with any information that we receive. We need to train for. Scriven and Paul are 2 distinguished professors when it comes to behavioral and organizational sciences. And they define critical thinking. And once they define critical thinking, they say that critical thinking is a set of skills that slowly become a habit. They become an inclination based on our intellectual commitment of using those skills and using those behaviors. Therefore, questioning the status quo, questioning any information that you receive critically is something that is of a habit which will take time to inculcate within our minds, within our hearts. That's number 1. Critical thinking will not just come within a second. We'll have to exert focus, and we'll have to practice it. Number 2, we need to take conscious effort when it comes to strive towards critical thinking. Let me share with you a tradition by Amir al-Mu'mineen, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. Amir al-Mu'mineen states, be aware, knowledge without thinking has no profit. Be aware, recitation of the Holy Quran without reflection is of little use. Be aware, worship lacking reflection has no effect. Let's go through one by one to understand what we mean when we say that. When Amir al-Mu'mineen says, be aware, knowledge without thinking is no profit. What does that mean? You see, filling your brain, filling your mind with scientific formulae, philosophical principles, facts, logical rules, and other bits and bobs of knowledge has little impact if it is not coupled with appropriate independent thinking. Why? Because knowledge, just theoretical, hypothetical knowledge without practical thinking, is nothing more but a collection of hypotheses and theories which with minimal practical application. And that's not really going to benefit us. It is when it's coupled with independent thinking where we actually apply that knowledge within our life, only then is it going to be useful. Let's continue. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, secondly, be aware the recitation of the Holy Quran without reflection is of very little use. You see, Amir al-Mu'mineen states that merely reciting the Holy Quran is beneficial, but is of little use. Why? Because when you recite the Holy Quran was sent to be understood. As well as reciting, we need to try and understand each of the words, each of the sentences that we recite. That may mean, for example, reading translations, reading the tafsir of the Holy Quran. Number 3, Amir al-Mu'mineen states, be aware, worship lacking reflection has no effect. Similarly, you see, when we perform worship, a worship that's devoid of thinking and wisdom, it's like a spiritless body that is unable to impart the high value that worship is meant to do. And so we see that one of the things that we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continually in the Holy Quran orders us to do is to reflect, to contemplate, to reason, to understand, to think deeply, not just at the surface level. At the end of the day, Islam is a progressive religion which encourages learning. It holds those individuals who seek knowledge at a very high regard. In fact, one of the first words revealed in the Holy Quran was what? Iqra, read. So Islam tries to inculcate the concept of knowledge, but more so the concept of thinking, tafakkur, contemplation, ta'aqqur, all of these within our lives. That was number 2 on how we can have this critical thinking within our lives. Finally, the point that I'd like to share with you on how we can inculcate this idea of critical thinking within our life is every time we receive news, especially from dubious sources, from sources that we have doubts on, we should always verify it. This is a Quranic principle itself. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Holy 49th chapter of the Holy Quran, verse number 6, He states, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who have brought faith, O you who believe, in ja'akum fasiqun binaba'in, if there comes to you a disobedient individual, someone with questionable source, with information, فَتَبَيَّنُوا أَن تُصِيبُوا قَوْمًا بِجَهَالَةٍ, investigate, lest you harm the people out of ignorance. فَتُصْبِحُوا عَلَى مَا فَأَلْتُمْ نَادِمِينَ, and become of what you have done regretful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here tells the believer that whenever an individual with dubious source, an individual that you have concerns about, comes to you with some information, don't take it at face value. Investigate it, corroborate it, make sure that the information stacks up. Let me give you the incident about which this holy verse was revealed. Once the Holy Prophet sent a man by the name of Walid bin Uqba to the people of Banu Mustaliq. Banu Mustaliq were a tribe of people that had recently converted and joined the religion of Islam. So the Holy Prophet told Walid, go take some the arms tax that this Banu Mustaliq have collected for you. Walid says, fine, very well. He goes towards the tribe of Banu Mustaliq. As soon as he reaches the vicinity where the Banu Mustaliq people used to live, he notices all of these Banu Mustaliq have come out of their houses. Now, Banu Mustaliq realized that someone that the Holy Prophet has sent has come. So they all, to pay respect, to pay homage, they all came out of their houses to welcome him. However, because Walid bin Uqba had some grievances with Banu Mustaliq before they had converted to Islam, long before, he thought that maybe Banu Mustaliq have come and they're going to come and attack me. So Walid bin Uqba got scared. He goes to the Holy Prophet and he says, these people have changed. The people of Banu Mustaliq, they're not Muslims. They actually came out to attack me. So at that time, the Holy Prophet was at a point where he was thinking, what's just happened? Are these people going to attack us soon? But as soon as Walid came, the people of Banu Mustaliq also came to the Holy Prophet. And they told the Holy Prophet, look, we had actually come to pay homage to Walid when we saw you that he's your messenger. But on seeing us, this individual, Walid, returned back to us. So we don't know why he's come back to you, but just so that there's no doubts, we wanted to come and convey the truth. Regardless, the tax that we had collected for you is ready. Please send someone and collect from us. So the Holy Prophet cautions another individual by the name of Khalid bin Walid, and he tells him, confidentially, go see if they actually have converted to Islam, and if they have collected the alms tax, collect it from them and bring it back. So Khalid goes, he goes at the time of Maghrib Salah. He sees that the Banu Mustalik actually raise the adhan, they pray namaz, and of course they give him this alms tax, and Khalid brings this alms tax to the Holy Prophet. And therefore this is where this verse of the Holy Quran was revealed, that whenever an individual, especially that individual that you have doubts on, presents you with information which source you have concerns over, corroborate it, investigate it, confirm it. So therefore, what this verse teaches us is that we need to verify the information that we get from all angles, be it from the media, be it from the information that is currently, the information age that is currently prevalent within our society in our global world. On that spirit, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi, states that whatever you hear from us against the Holy Quran, whatever you hear from us, compare our words against the Holy Quran. And if you find that our words and the Holy Quran are the same, then accept them. Otherwise, do not even acknowledge them. Now, in a similar spirit, we need to understand that when we receive information from our current sources, which is of course the media, especially out in the open, we need to make sure that we corroborate that information. We don't just take it at face value, as someone likes to call it. There's a lot of fake news out there. So Malik al-Shabbaz, better known as Malcolm X, who was an African-American Muslim minister and a human rights activist, especially a popular figure amongst the civil rights movement, and is known for the steadfast movement that he had for the black racial advocacy. So Malcolm X states in a very famous quote, if you're not careful of the newspapers, if you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are actually being oppressed, and they would have you loving those people that are actually doing the oppressing. So therefore, whenever we get information from whatever source, be it TV channels, social media, any other sort of media, we need to exercise our own independent thinking, our own critical thinking, and engage with that in that manner. And therefore, I'd like to now bring this discussion to a close. Before I do that, before I present a conclusion to tie any loose strings, I would like to present a summary of what we have discussed tonight. Tonight, in the topic titled Importance of Critical Thinking Within Our Own Life, we started off discussing the example of Prophet Ibrahim, how he was a critical thinker. He would question everything. And he also asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala he asked Allah a question which would elevate his own level of faith. We discussed the critical thinking from the perspective of the Holy Quran, how the Quran encourages us to contemplate, to reason, to think critically. We spoke about the incidents of Muawiyah and Amir al-Mu'mineen, where Muawiyah had slaughtered the goat, and people actually believed him. And the mind was such that they actually believed Muawiyah, and they did whatever Muawiyah would tell them. We discussed about the incident of the Holy Prophet taking this village to an extreme situation to build them out, to break that practice of not being of critically thinking. And finally, we discussed strategies on how we can critically think and how we can inculcate critical thinking within our own lives. For example, we discussed how critical thinking comes with being proactive practice. It's not going to happen automatically. We discussed that we must take a conscious effort striving towards critical thinking when it comes to knowledge, reciting Quran, and worship, as Amir al-Mu'mineen stated in his hadith. And finally, from the Holy Quran, we stated that whenever we get information from dubious sources, whenever we get information from questionable sources, we need to corroborate that information. We need to investigate this situation. And therefore, to present a conclusion, let me finish with you how Imam Hussein alayhi salam's whole movement, even on the day of Ashura, was one that encouraged people, his enemies, to think, to use their reason, to use their intellect. At the end of the day, Imam Hussein alayhi salam wanted to reverberate the society. Imam Hussein alayhi salam, as we discussed on the first night, wanted to shake the people. Imam Hussein alayhi salam, in a sermon on the day of Ashura, he states, "O people, listen to me. O people, listen to me. Do not make haste to kill me, so that I may inform you what I must and evaluate you of the reason for coming to Iraq." Imam Hussein alayhi salam states that when I finish with what I have to say, then you will have no reason to kill me. Abu Abdullah states, you must think over the pros and cons of the matter before you kill me. And you shouldn't take such a delicate task rashly without deliberation. And throughout the sermon, if you study the sermon for Abu Abdullah, he urges the enemies to think, he urges the enemies to deliberate, not do anything rashly. He asks them to first recognize him, that he is the grandson of Rasulullah. He says, by Allah, there is no other grandson of the Holy Prophet in the East or the West except for myself, from amongst yourself or anyone else. And then he asks them, he questions them, have I killed anyone from among you? Whose revenge do you desire? Have I usurped the wealth of anyone or hurt anyone whose retribution you desire from us? And therefore, to conclude this, I leave with a tradition of Abu Abdullah, that if you do not believe in any religion, you do not fear any religion, then at least be free in this world. And therefore, from the episode of Karbala, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, throughout his journey, tries to shake the people. He tries to tell the people to think critically. Before we move on to the Masa'ib, please recite a very loud salawat.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
And this concludes our discussion on the importance of critical thinking within our lives. Brothers and sisters, mourners of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, tonight is the night of Ashura. Tonight is a night where we discuss the musibah of Ali al-Asghar. The musibah of Ali al-Asghar is a very difficult musibah. Amongst all of the musibah of Ali al-Asghar is a musibah that's caused a lot of grief, a lot of pain in the hearts of the Ahlul Bayt, even years after the tragedy of Karbala happened. When Mukhtar Thaqafi began his revolution, they say that they would send a news to Imam Sajjad. They would say that we have now caught Khuli, we've caught Shimr, and this is what has happened to them. However, every time Imam Sajjad would ask, tell me about Harmala. Has Harmala been caught? The act that Harmala did caused a lot of grief, a lot of pain in the hearts of the Ahlul Bayt, even after many years after the Karbala. Brothers and sisters, the musibah of Ali al-Asghar is a musibah that caused Abu Abdullah himself a lot of pain. It is this musibah that Abu Abdullah refers to you and I, his Shi'as. He says, oh my Shi'as, how I wish you were there on the day of Ashura. You would have seen how I took my 6-month-old baby to them and what mercy they showed upon me. This is the night of Ali al-Asghar. Brothers and sisters, tonight is the night of Ashura. There is this night and there is a night of tomorrow. Tonight is a night which we call the night of Ashura. Tomorrow is a night which we shall call Shab al-Ghariba. Tonight is a night where all the children have their fathers beside them. Tonight is a night where all the wives have their husbands beside them. Tonight is a night where all of the sisters have their brothers beside them. Tonight is a night where all of the mothers have their children, their loved sons beside them. The tents are standing, the night lamp is lit, and the hijab of the ladies is still with them. But brothers and sisters, mourners of Aba Abdullah, it is only going to be a 24 hours where the entire scene in Karbala will completely be transformed. For the child will now be orphaned, wives will be widowed, brothers, sisters will be bereaved of their brothers, and mothers will be in mourning of their sons. Tents would be looted. The night lamp will be darkened, the hijab of the ladies will be snatched away. Brothers and sisters, tonight is the night of Ashura. On a night like this, I wish to take your nights to the night of Ashura in Karbala, where the companions one by one, the family of the Holy Prophet one by one, sit amongst themselves, ready themselves for the day to come. On a night like this, Farwa sits with her son Qasim. On a night like this, Layla sits with Ali al-Akbar. On a night like this, Zainab sits with and Muhammad, her beloved child. Brothers, what would the mothers of Karbala be saying to their children? Oh, children, tomorrow is the day to help Hussein. Tomorrow is the day to aid the religion of Rasulullah. Tomorrow is the day to show the valor and courage of Ali. Brothers and sisters, with a heavy heart, the mothers would be spending a final night with their loved ones. On a night like this, brothers and sisters, I'd like to take your mind to the tent of Rabab. Rabab would also be sitting next to the cradle of her 6-month-old, unaware that this is also the final night that Rabab would be spending with Ali al-Asghar. Brothers, on a night like this, never forget the sacrifice of Rabab. For tonight is a night of Ali al-Asghar, who was butchered in the hands of his father. Tonight is the night of Ali al-Asghar, who will never again feel the comfort and the warmth of the lap of his mother. Tonight is the night of that neck which will be raised, which will be struck with a 3-pronged arrow. Tonight is a night of that head that shall be raised high amongst the spears. Brothers and sisters, the day of Ashura dawns upon Karbala. Hussein is now gharib. Hussein is now lonely. Habib is no more. Muslim, Zuhair, Qasim, Akbar, Muhammad. No one is there left with Hussein. Hussein now walks towards a hill. He looks towards the right. He looks towards the left. He calls out, Ala hal min nasiri yansurna. Ala hal min ghabin yadubbu an harami Rasulullah. Is there any supporter to help me? Is there anyone to aid the family of Rasulullah? As soon as Imam Hussein alayhi salam said this, the cries from the woman could be heard. The woman realized that now Hussein is nearing his final time. Hussein comes to the tent of the woman, for he says, Zainab, give to me my youngest son so that I may bid farewell to him for the final time. Zainab gives to him Ali al-Asghar. Hussein takes Ali al-Asghar in his arms. He looks at him. He starts kissing him. Brothers and sisters, the narration states that Ali al-Asghar was so weak. His eyes had now gone at the back of his head. The only strength that Ali al-Asghar now had was to open his mouth and close his mouth. Hussein looks at Ali al-Asghar. He realizes this. He says, let me try. Let me go and take this baby towards the enemy. Maybe they'll give him water. Hussein takes him out to the battlefield. The heat of Karbala is scorching hot. Hussein covers Ali al-Asghar with his aba. As soon as Hussein comes forward, the enemy start thinking amongst themselves that now Hussein is all alone. Hussein is gharib. Maybe he's bringing the Holy Quran with him. Hussein now wants to surrender. But as soon as Hussein takes his aba out, the army of Yazid sees that no, this is the 6-month-old child, Ali al-Asghar. Hussein calls out to them. He says, your war is with me. Your enmity is with me. This child has done nothing wrong to you. You have no war or enmity with him. For the sake of Allah, give him some water. Hussein, narration states, he also places Ali al-Asghar on the floor so that the enemies might think they may give water to him directly. But the enemies turn around. Hussein picks up the body of Asghar back in his arm. He keeps it close to him. At that point, the army of Amr bin Sa'd starts changing. The men amongst the soldiers began crying. The soldiers began hiding their face with tears dropping. Umar bin Sa'ad realized that something's going to happen. He calls out to Hurmala. He says something that truly breaks the heart. He says, Hurmala, iqta' kalam al-Hussein. Hurmala, cut off the speech of Hussein. Now what Hurmala says cuts the heart even deeper. Hurmala says, Umar ibn Sa'ad, who should I aim for? Should I aim for the father or should I aim for the child? Umar ibn Sa'ad's response is even worse. He says, oh Hurmala, aim for that white spot in the neck of the child. Hurmala says, okay. He takes out an arrow. He takes out a three-pronged arrow. Brothers and sisters, in Arabia, there is a one-pronged arrow. There is a two-pronged arrow. There is a three-pronged arrow. A one-pronged arrow is used to break the neck of a man. A three-pronged arrow is used to break the neck of a camel. Hurmala takes out a three-pronged arrow. Where is the head? Where is the neck of a 6-month-old child? Where is the neck of a camel? Hurmala aims towards that child. He releases that arrow. That arrow pierces the neck of Asghar. Would you like to know in what way that arrow pierces the neck of Ali ibn al-Asghar, and how that arrow pierces that neck of Ali ibn al-Asghar? The three-pronged arrow, the neck of a 6-month-old baby. Assalamu ala الطفل الرضيع مذبوح من الأذن إلى الأذن. Peace be upon that infant child who was slaughtered from ear to ear. Brothers and sisters, that arrow came with such a force that it pierced the neck of Ali ibn al-Asghar with such a force that the baby starts moving, that the baby moved at the arms of Abu Abdullah. Now Abu Abdullah looks towards the baby, dumbfounded, not knowing what to say. He looks towards the heavens. He again looks towards the baby. When Mukhtar caught Harmala, he asked Harmala, oh Harmala, what did you do in Karbala? Harmala said that I fired 4 significant arrows on the day of Ashura. What were those arrows? The first of the arrow that I fired was into the eye of Al-Abbas. The second arrow that I fired was at Asri Ashura, at the chest of Hussein. In Maqatil, you say, in Maqatil, you hear that the force with which this arrow pierced the chest of Abu Abdullah was so great that the head of the arrow came at the back of Abu Abdullah. On Ashura day, you hear the narrators say that Hussein had to pull that arrow out from his back, and when he did so, a fountain of blood gushed out from his chest. That was the second arrow. The third arrow that I fired was at Abdullah bin Hassan, the younger brother of Qasim. They say when Imam Hussein alayhi salam was in his final moments, Abdullah, the son of Hassan, comes out to defend his uncle. A soldier strikes at the arm of Abdullah. A soldier strikes at the arm of this child. This child falls at the body of Hussein. Hussein comfortingly holds him so that he may find some solace. I shot my third arrow at the body of Abdullah, killing him instantly at the arms of the uncle. And then narration states that Harmala began crying. Mukhtar asks, Harmala, why do you cry? Harmala states, I cried because of the fourth arrow. What was that fourth arrow? Harmala says the fourth arrow was a 3-pronged arrow that I fired at the child. Mukhtar says, fine, but you, why do you cry after so much dhulm? Harmala says that I cry for Hussein's mazlumiyat. For when I flew that arrow, when I released that arrow, when I saw the face of Hussein, it broke my heart. Mukhtar says, Harmala, what do you mean? He says that when I released the arrow and it pierced the neck of the infant baby, Hussein, I looked at the face of Hussein. Hussein looks at his 6-month-old baby. He looks towards the sky. He looks again at the 6-month-old baby. Hussein is dumbfounded. He does not know how to react. At that point, when I saw the face of Hussein, I realized Hussein was truly gharib. Hussein was truly lonely at that point. Brothers and sisters, now Hussein takes the baby, he takes the body of his 6-month-old infant, he walks towards the tent. But something happens that's never happened in the epic of Karbala. Something happens that's never happened in the battle of Karbala. Brothers and sisters, mourners of Aba Abdullah, have you ever seen Hussein being worried when he is picking up the corpse of any other Shuhada? Do you see Hussein walking forward and then backwards with any other Shuhada? But when it comes to Ali al-Asghar, Hussein is dumbfounded. He's worried. How am I going to present this 6-month-old child in front of a mother that's waiting for him? How am I going to present this 6-month-old infant to Sakina? Hussein is worried, he's dumbfounded. He walks forward, he comes backwards, reciting, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un, ridam biqada'ihi wa tasliman li'amrih. Hussein comes towards the tent. Rabab rushes out from the tent, looking at Hussein. Hussein takes off his abba. Rabab looks at the face of Hussein. She looks at the face of Ali al-Asghar, the lifeless body hangs in the arms of Hussein. Rabab had nothing to say. All she has to say is, Ya Bunayya, Amithluka Yunhar. My child, our children like you, slaughtered in the way of the camel. Oh, my Asghar, oh, my infant child. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. ماتم يا حسين يا حسين
يا حسين
يا حسين
يا حسين
يا حسين
يا
شهر مظلوم जब आई शब आशूर लोगो शह मजलूम जब आई शब आशूर लोगो शह मजलूम जब आई शब आशूर लोगो सकीना यूं लगी कहने के बाबा कहो मुझको तुम्हें क्या सर कटाने की यही एक रात है बाकी शह मजलूम जब आई शब आशूर लोगो तो अब मुझको हुआ मालूम ये बेवाली वारिस की रिदाओं के जिनाने की यही एक रात है बाकी शह मजलूम जब आई शब आशूर लोगो शह मजलूम जब आई शब आशूर लोगो कहाँ सर को कटाने की यही एक रात है बाकी मेरे प्यारे मेरे प्यासे मेरे भैया अली असग़र गला नाज़ुक कटाने की यही एक रात है बाकी शह मज़लूम जब आई शब आशूर रे लोगो, हमारे ख़ैमे जलाने की हमें दर दर फिराने की, हमारे घर लुटाने की यही एक रात है बाकी। शे मज़लूम जब आई शबे आशूरे लोगो, कहाँ सर को कटाने की यही एक रात है बाकी। ए मोमिनो जब खून में डूबा हुआ या असगर का जनाजा, ए मोमिनो जब खून में डूबा हुआ या असगर का जनाजा, ए मोमिनो जब खून में डूबा हुआ या असगर का जनाजा, चे मोमिनो जब खून में डूबा हुआ या असगर का जनाजा, ए मोमिनो जब खून में डूबा हुआ या असगर का जनाजा। शबीर ने रो रो के कलेजे से लगाया असगर का जनाजा, ए मोमिनो जब खून में डूबा हुआ या असगर का जनाजा, ए मोमिनो जब खून में डूबा हुआ या असगर का जनाजा। या हुसैन,
Ya
Ya
Hussein.
Hussein,
हुसैन,
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. झूला झूलाऊं ऐ मेरे असगर, झूला झूलाऊं ऐ मेरे असगर, झूला झूलाऊं ऐ मेरे असगर, लोरी सुनाऊं ऐ मेरे असगर, दूध पिलाऊं हाँ मेरे असगर, दूध पिलाऊं हाँ मेरे असगर, झूला झूलाऊं ऐ मेरे असगर, झूला झूलाऊं ऐ मेरे असगर। मेरे मुजाहिद मेरे सिपाही, खत्म हुई मैदान में लड़ाई, खत्म हुई मैदान में लड़ाई। घर को सिधारो माँ को पुकारो, घर को सिधारो माँ को पुकारो, मैं चैन पाऊं आ मेरे असगर, झूला झूलाऊं लोरी सुनाऊं, दूध पिलाऊं आ मेरे असगर। याद आ रही है मासूम बेटी, दिन में सुकून है बेचैन रातें, दिन में सुकून है बेचैन रातें। जी ना सकूंगी, जी ना सकूंगी, आंसू बहाऊं आ मेरे असगर, झूला झूलाऊं ऐ मेरे असगर, दूध पिलाऊं आ मेरे असगर। पूछ रही है बाली सकीना, क्यों नहीं आया लौट के भैया, क्यों नहीं आया लौट के भैया। तू ही बता दे मैदान से आके, मैं क्या बताऊं आ मेरे असगर, झूला झूलाऊं दूध पिलाऊं, लोरी सुनाऊं आ मेरे असगर, झूला झूलाऊं ऐ मेरे असगर। या हुसैन, या हुसैन, या
Hussein.
हुसैन, या
Hussein.
हुसैन,
Hussein.
या हुसैन, हुसैन 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 हुसैन, या हुसैन,
Ya
या
Hussein.
हुसैन,
Ya
या
Hussein,
हुसैन,
Ya
या
Hussein,
हुसैन,
Ya
या
Hussein,
हुसैन, या हुसैन, या हुसैन, या अकबरा हुसैना, या मजलूमा हुसैना, या अकबरा, या मजलूमा हुसैना, हुसैना। या अल्लाह, अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मोहम्मद व आले मोहम्मद।
Ya Hussein,
Hussein,
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. करबला ए करबला ये तो बता, करबला ए करबला ये तो बता, जुल्म सरहद में तेरी क्यों कर हुआ, करबला ए करबला ये तो बता। एक मुसाफिर आया था तेरे यहाँ जिसका नाना था रसूले दो जहां, नूर आईने फातिमा हैदर की जान। क्या हुआ वो सारबाने कारवां, करबला है करबला ये तो बता, करबला है करबला ये तो बता। दोष अहमद पर चढ़ा था वो हुसैन, गोद जहरा में पला था वो हुसैन, दिलबर मुश्किल कुशा था वो हुसैन, ज़ब्ह खंजर से हुआ था वो हुसैन, करबला करबला ये तो बता, करबला है करबला ये तो बता। आखिरी रुखसत को जब आए हुसैन, हो गया खैमे में बरपा शोर शैन, पीट कर सर करती थी ये ज़ैनबी बहन, आपके जाने से आएगा न चैन, कर बलाए कर बलाए तो बता, कर बलाए कर बला ये तो बता। छोड़ कर मुझको न जाओ भाईजान, आप बिन कोई नहीं मेरे यहाँ, दूर है अपना वतन जाऊं कहाँ, ये नजर आती नहीं जाने अमा, कर बलाए कर बला ये तो बता, कर बला कर बला ये तो बता, जुल्म सरहद में तेरी क्यों कर हुआ, करबला है करबला ये तो बता, जुल्म सरहद में कोई। या हुसैन, या
Hussein,
या हुसैन,
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 Hussein.
या हुसैन। और मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सलवात।
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سورة مباركة الفاتحة. I mean, just a couple of quick reminders. Inshallah, Rosa Ashur is tomorrow. Amal will start at 10 a.m. Inshallah. Program was sent out earlier today on the details and the breakdown of tomorrow's program. So Amal will be live led with Uncle Amin Dala, sharp at 10 a.m. Inshallah. And then we will start the Ashura Majlis Inshallah at 1:15 p.m. And then, of course, just as a reminder, we have our Ashura at the Baruch drive-through at 4:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. tomorrow. For those of you that have RSVP'd, we do require you to please be on time to pick up your tabarruk, inshallah. And then the Sham Ghariba Majlis will start at 8:30 p.m. And then also we do have our
Hassan, you're muted.
Can you guys still hear me?
Now we can.
Oh, sorry. Was I muted all this time?
Yes.
Okay.
So after Tabarruk, you said,
Yeah, so after the Tabarruk, we will have Sham Ghariba at 8:30 p.m. inshallah, and then conclude for the evening. And also, let's recite Dua Shifa for, we have a request for Dua Shifa for Birjis Gadri's father, who is not well in Lucknow, India. So let's recite Dua Shifa 5 times Aman Yujibu for him, and also those who are sick in our family and around the world. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim.
لا يجيب يجيب أما يجيب المسر يكشف السوء يجيب المسر يكشف السوء.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. We do have little kids reciting Ziyarat and Dua Faraj this evening. So Fatima, if you're ready, please start with Ziyarat.
I'm ready. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Assalamu alayka ya Ibn Rasulullah. Assalamu alayka ya Ibn Amir al-Mu'mineen wa Ibn Sayyid al-Wasin. Assalamu alayka ya Ibn Fatima Zahra Sayyidat an-Nisa al-Alamin. Assalamu alayka ya Abul Fazl al-Abbas. Assalamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alayka ya Gharib al-Ghuraba. Assalamu alayka ya Sultan Abul Hassan ya Ali ibn Musa Rida. Assalamu alayka ya Fatima Masuma. Assalamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alayka ya Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman. Alaman, Alaman, Alaman. Assalamu alayka ya Khalifat ar-Rahman. Assalamu alayka ya Imam Insi wal Jan. Assalamu alayka ya Sharik al-Quran. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Okay. Azad and Adam, if you're ready.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allahumma kulli aliyuka jatna hasan salawatuka alayhi wa labahi fi hadha sa wa fi kulli sa وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا وليا معينا حتى تسكنه أرضك ومرته فيها إلا اللهم صل على محمد.
MashaAllah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. MashaAllah.
Alhamdulillah, so that concludes our program for tonight. So inshallah, 10 a.m. tomorrow, we'll be live streaming via our same means, Zoom and YouTube. And for those that are going to be reciting, I just forgot to mention this one quick announcement. For those that are going to be reciting for the Amal, please be on Zoom so that we can then broadcast it to YouTube, inshallah. With that, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Hassan.